everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Sarah, and in today's video we're going to do episode 2 of how to crochet. Now, we first started our series with this popping mushroom, and we introduced how to crochet in the round and single crochet, increase, decrease. We also learned how to color change and stitch eyes on. So if you don't know how to do those yet, I recommend checking out episode 1 just to learn the basics of what we did here. We'll also be crocheting just a tiny bit faster for today's pattern, which is a mini whale. Because I have already laid the foundation in this first episode, we'll just be crocheting just a tiny bit faster. Now, I will not go super fast. We'll still go super slow. It's just I'll lay down the foundation. I don't need to re-explain it here. So if you haven't seen that one, make sure to check it out. Now, if you're here just for the tutorial, you can go ahead and skip to the next chapter in the video where we'll go through the material list. But if you're here for episode 2, so we will be crocheting the whale today, and instead of going to one of my more complicated patterns, I figured this is a good step up from the popping mushroom. I know that the axolotl pattern is pretty popular, but it does have a lot of complicated techniques, so I just want to start with taking you one step at a time. We're going to start by learning how to crochet fins on as we work. So these are made while we crochet, and I wanted to put the whale first rather than the axolotl because the axolotl could be a lot more complicated. Other than that, we'll also be learning how to do crocheting in the back loop only. As we learned in the episode 1, a crochet stitch has 2 loops, the front and the back, and for most stitches we crochet through both, but to make a super flat belly and the color change, we will be working in the back loops only. We'll also be color changing like we did with our last pattern. And I think that's about it for the new techniques. We will be using safety eyes if you have them, otherwise we'll be stitching the eyes in like these guys, either or. That's about it for the new things we'll be learning. We're going to get right into the material list. So we will need some yarn to start with. I recommend if you're a beginner using some size 4 or worsted yarn, either in acrylic or cotton. These tend to shed a little bit less than blends like wool or something similar, just because that can be really difficult to work with. You can use it in 2 colors, or you can use 1 color, and you can ignore the color change, which we'll be doing later in the video. I am using a light blue and a white, so white for the belly, blue for the rest of the piece, and then you'll just need a little bit of scrap yarn if you are going to stitch the eyes on. This can be in black or your secondary color, whichever one you'd like. I love this yarn, and I buy it from Hobby Lobby. Just a really good yarn. It's nice and soft, softer than Red Heart, so if you've ever touched Red Heart, you know it can be pretty itchy. This yarn is pretty soft and it's pretty easy to work with. If you need any help with the material list, you can check out my coffee shop. I do free blog posts for these tutorials, so if you need some written help, something to just follow along with while we go through the video, you can check that out. All of it will be linked in the description. Now we'll need a crochet hook. I'm going to be using a 4mm hook with my size 4 yarn. If you are using a different yarn and it's like a size 5 or a 6 or something similar, then use a crochet hook that goes with that yarn. I do this by, say you have size 4 yarn, I'm going to use a 4mm hook. You have a 5mm hook, and you can adjust it as needed depending on your tension, and as you learn more you'll figure out which hook works best for you. A lot of people use 3.5 for size 4 yarn, but you can really just use any hook you can until you get the hang of it, and then you can figure out what hook you want to use from there. You also need a pair of scissors. This can just be a basic pair of scissors. I like to use these ones for my yarn. If you're going to continue crafting, I recommend getting a scissors just for fabric, because paper dulls scissors really bad. Now you're going to need a sewing needle. I like to use metal ones, but you can also use plastic ones if you have them on hand. And then stitch markers. Now these are my favorite stitch markers. They're big, they close really easily, and they open easily. If you don't have stitch markers on hand, you can just use a bit of scrap yarn instead, or even like a bobby pin or a safety pin as well. So now our stuffing. You do not need stuffing. I highly recommend using stuffing, but you can also use scrap yarn or spare fabric if you have it. You can also use cotton balls. Now, I've heard people use this before. I would break it up if you were going to use it, and it might be hard to sew through, so just keep that in mind. And then you'll need safety eyes if you wish to use safety eyes on this piece. I'll just be showing you how to embroider eyes, and we'll make them a little bit bigger than this for this tutorial. So if you have safety eyes on hand, you can use them. Otherwise, you can stitch the eyes on, which I'll show you how to do. Now we're going to begin the pattern. And in our last episode, we did talk about starting our work, but I'm still going to show you how to do it because that can be the most tedious part, is trying to remember how to do it, especially since if you have only crocheted a few times, you've only done starting your work just a couple of times, and that can be really hard to remember. Just thinking like we single crochet all the time, lots of single crochets, and we have it basically memorized, but then the way we start our round can make it harder to remember, if that makes any sense at all. Probably just rambling at this point. I pulled the center thread, that's why it took me so long to get the yarn out. So we're going to start by making our slip knot. I use the chain 2 method. As I said in the other episode, if you use the magic ring method, that's perfectly fine. I will be using and showing you how to use the chain 2 method. Now, if you don't know what either method is, you can just use either method, whether it's a magic ring or a chain 2. If someone calls for a magic ring in their pattern, you can use the chain 2 method. You're not going to notice much of a difference at all. Keep that in mind. You have our tail here. We're going to wrap it around our 2 fingers and hold it in place with our thumb. Then we're going to wrap it around our fingers again and make an X on the back and 2 loops on the front. Now what we're going to do is take our hook, go under, and then pull the back loop through the front loop, hold those 2 tails, and close the knot. Now that's how you make a slip knot for the chain 2 method. Now what we're going to do is chain 2. Chain 2, just to recap, we yarn over and pull through, and we're going to do that twice. Now the loop on our hook is our working loop. It does not count as a stitch, don't count it, but remember the chain is 1V and 2V. Now what we're going to do is we're going to work in this loop here of our first chain. It's going to be a loose loop, and that's how we can get the magic ring to close, or the chain 2 method to close. Now what we're going to do is single crochet 6 into this chain. And a single crochet, if you remember, is made by inserting your hook, yarning over, and then pull through that 1 loop, yarn over, and pull through 2 loops, and that's a single crochet. Now we're going to repeat that 5 more times. Insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through the final 2 loops on your hook. Repeat that 4 more times to create 6 single crochets. And I forgot to mention earlier, but if I end up going too fast, make sure to pause the video, slow the video down, replay it as much as you need. This is not meant to be frustrating, and that's why we use the pausing and the slowing down and everything. It's not a bad thing to use it. It is a good thing, and it's how you learn. Once you have 6 single crochets, you're going to pull the tail, our loose end of our yarn, closed. Now if you did the slip knot right, it will close really easily. If you didn't do the slip knot, it will be really difficult to close. Now if you can't close it, there are 2 things you can do. 1, you can stitch up the hole later, or 2, you can pull it out and start again. I highly recommend for the first couple of tries to just pull it out and try again, rather than trying to force it to close and it won't. Now we're going to move on to round 2, and before we do that, we're going to mark the last stitch of our round, and this is the last stitch we'll work on before we finish our round. So I just like to place a stitch marker in between both loops of that stitch, and now we're going to do round 2. Round 2 is where we increase in each stitch. Now increasing is just 2 single crochets in 1 stitch, if you recall from our last episode. I'm sorry for the strange cuts. I keep getting phone calls. Here's the thing. I thought that since I'm in my quiet house and nobody's home right now, that I'd be able to film this tutorial. Well, it turns out I forgot that they call me all the time, so that's why I keep getting distracted and the cuts are in here. But we're going to move on to round 2 and hopefully have no more interruptions. Now, as I was saying, round 2, we're just going to increase in each stitch around. To recap how to do an increase, you're going to insert your hook through the 2 loops of your single crochet. But real quick, this loop right here, this is not a stitch, that is the chain we worked in. We're just going to straight up ignore it. Now in the first single crochet, insert yarn over, and yarn over through the 2 loops to make 1 single crochet, and you're going to repeat that again in the same stitch to make an increase, just like so. Now we're going to increase all the way around for a total of 6 increases. In that final stitch, just work your increase. If you can't get your hook in there with the stitch marker, take it out before doing your increase. And when you're done, we're just going to close up your hole a bit more if yours opened up like mine did. And we will be securing this tail in just a little bit. A lot of tutorials out there won't have you secure your tail, but I highly recommend doing that. It keeps the magic ring or your J&2 method from coming loose with time, and just makes it all around more secure. Now, once you are done with round 2, you're going to add your stitch marker back to the last stitch of the round, and we're going to start round 3. Now, round 3, we are going to increase and then single crochet. So just do 2 single crochets in 1 stitch, and then a single crochet, and we're going to repeat that all the way around. So begin with your increase, then our single crochet, and then we will do that all the way around. Once you have finished that round, we'll restart our stitch marker at the final stitch of the round. And this is what your rounds will look like. We're on our 3rd round here. Moving on to our 4th round. Now for our 4th round, it's actually our final increase round. So we're only going to increase 1 more time, and then we're going to get into some single crochet rounds to start creating the body. Now for round 4, we're going to increase and then single crochet 2, and we're going to repeat that all the way around. Begin with your increase and then single crochet 2, and repeat that all the way around. So increase, single crochet 2, and over and over and over until you're done. There is our final increase round. This is how it should look, or very similar. And you're going to reset your stitch marker at the final stitch of the round. And now we're going to single crochet in each stitch around. So just 1 single crochet in each of the V's. And before we move on, we're actually going to count our stitches. I forgot to encourage you to do this at the beginning of the tutorial, but that's okay, we can do it now. So each stitch has a V on the top, and that's how we tell it's a single crochet. And you're going to count each V. We have 1, 2, 3, and so on all the way around. You should have 24 V's at this point. And 24. Remember, do not count your working loop. That does not count as a stitch. If you have 24 stitches, you can move on. If you don't have 24 stitches, you can still move on depending on how many you have. If you have an extra stitch, then you can just continue working and it's okay. We will be crocheting the tail and the fins into the piece, but you can always add an extra stitch somewhere or take away a stitch somewhere if you don't want to restart. But if you're willing to restart to get the stitch count correct, you can do that as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to single crochet in each stitch around, and we're going to repeat that for 3 rounds. Here's our first single crochet round. Now, before we continue on, I just want to address something. If you're not here for the beginner tutorial and you already know this, you can go ahead and skip ahead, continue single crocheting. But when you're working with your piece, it will naturally tend to roll this side out. So this is the wrong side of your work, and you can tell this because of the humps over each stitch. It will naturally turn the other way, so you'll have to push it out the correct way. The other way you can tell you're working on the wrong side is if you're single crocheting to the inside of your piece. So the inside is here and you're working from the inside out. You want to be working from the outside in, and it will be easier to crochet like this anyways, so keep that in mind as you're working. Now continue your single crochet rounds. I have 2 remaining for a total of 3 rounds. I'm not sure if you can hear her, but if you can, that is Lulu meowing. Like I said, the house is very quiet today, so she wants to fill up the empty space with her voice. There's round 2, and you can reset your stitch marker after each round into that final stitch, just as we've been doing. And once you have finished your 3 single crochet rounds, reset your stitch marker and pull up your loop. We are going to secure our center tail before moving on. So turn your piece inside out and make sure your magic ring or your chain 2 is closed as you can get it. Now thread your needle with your tail, and we're going to secure this end with a few knots. So we're just going to grab one of the humps and pull our needle through it. Now what I like to do is grab the loop that kind of sticks out. This is a chain. Just when you're using the chain 2 method, it tends to stick out. So I like to grab that too and pull it tight. And we're going to repeat this at least 2 times just to make sure the tail is very secure. Now what we're doing is creating knots on the back side, so preventing the yarn from being able to be pulled out the opposite direction. And it'll keep the doll from falling apart over time as quickly. Keep a kid from being able to get their finger in it and open it up. And just all around, give the doll more longevity. So if you aren't doing this, you really should be. It does take an extra little bit of time, but it is worth it. And it keeps your center secure. Once you have secured that tail, you can turn your piece right side out again, and we will be finished with that tail. We don't have to do anything else with it. Now we're going to do our final round. I don't know what I was on about. Our final round with this secondary color. So this is where we're going to start our tail first. Now we're going to chain 7 to start our tail. So yarn over, pull through, and do that 7 times. Just like so. And if you need to count your chains, it's 1V, 2V, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 V's. Just like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to skip this first chain that we made, and we're going to work into the next chain. Now if you turn your chain, you'll see that the chain has humps. These are the humps that I will be working into to make it nicer, but you can also crochet on top of the V's as well if you want to make it a little bit easier on yourself. Now what we're going to do is single crochet in the next 3 chains. So skip that first chain, single crochet in the next chain. Just through that top hump is what I like to do. Yarn over, pull through, and there's our first single crochet. And we're going to do this 2 more times. If you can't tell where the hump is, you can just crochet into the chain and it won't look very much different. As you continue on, you will be able to see the V's a little bit better and the humps, and crochet a little bit nicer. But if you're a beginner, just do your best because that's all that matters. Now in the next hump or chain stitch, we will be slip stitching. Now the slip stitch is made by inserting your hook, yarning over and pulling through the loop on your hook, just like that. Now we're going to work on the second part of the fin. So this is the first part. We're going to do the second part. Now what we're going to do is chain 4, just from where we're working, and chain 4. Just like that. Now we're going to skip the first chain just like we did previously and single crochet into the next chain. Now we're going to single crochet in the next 2 chains as well. Then we are going to slip stitch again, but in that same chain where we slip stitched previously. You should be able to see it pretty clearly. Just try and get your hook in there and slip stitch once again. Just like so. Now we'll have 2 chains remaining. And we're going to slip stitch in both those chains. Just like so. There we have our fin. And you can adjust it as much as you like. Just like so. Now what we're going to do is we're going to single crochet in the next 6 stitches. So we're going to work right back into where we were working earlier and single crochet 6. There's our 6 single crochets. Now we're going to work on our first fin. And the way we're going to do this is by chaining 4. Just like so. And we're going to skip the first chain and we're going to single crochet into that second chain from hook. Now we're going to talk about a new stitch, and it is called the half double crochet. I'm going to show you how to do it. The half double crochet is slightly bigger than the single crochet, and the way you're going to do this is by yarning over on your hook. and you're going to insert your hook into the next chain stitch. You should have 3 loops now. Yarn over and pull through that chain stitch you just pulled through. You just inserted your hook through. And you'll have 3 loops. And to complete the half double crochet, we will go through all 3 loops, just like so. To show you how to do that one more time, you're going to yarn over, insert into your final chain, yarn over, pull through the chain, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops, just like so. That is how you do the half double crochet. I'll show you how to do it again on the other side as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to single crochet in the next 12 stitches. So we're just going to work right back into our body and single crochet 12. Here's where we're at. When you single crochet 12, you'll have a fin and our tail, and then we just have to make 1 more fin. So once you've finished your single crochet rounds, we're going to chain 4, just like we did with our last fin. Chain 4. Now you're going to skip that first chain and single crochet in the second chain from hook, just like so. Then you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull through the chain, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops. That's our half double crochet. And we're going to do that one more time. Yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over, and pull through, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops. And there we have our chain, or not our chain, our half double crochet finished. Now we're going to single crochet in the final 6 stitches of our round. You can remove your stitch marker and keep it off for now because we're going to be changing color. Now we're going to do this by slip stitching in our next stitch. So this will be around the tail. You can see our single crochet here and the V on top of it. We're going to slip stitch into that stitch. So pull through all of the loops on your hook, chain 1, and fasten off. Fasten off just means to cut your tail and pull through. We're just going to need a tiny yarn tail because it will be just tucked right into the body. Now, if you got to this point, I want you to give yourself a huge round of applause and celebrate a little bit because that's amazing, especially if this is your second time crocheting for the episodes. You guys are doing amazing, and I'd love to hear your experience so far. And we only have just a tiny bit left to go before we're finished with our baby whale. And that is to join our second color on and finish our decrease rounds up, close up the body. Now we're going to create a slip knot onto the hook, our hook, with the secondary color. We're going to do this the opposite way than I showed you earlier, and the reason I do this is because a slip knot can be pulled by either the tail or the working end. Now if you're working with your chain 2 method, the tail should control the slip, that way you can close it and open it much easier. If you do it the other way, you won't be able to close it because your working yarn won't be able to be tugged to close the loop. But since we're not creating a circle or working the chain 2 method, we can create a different type of slip knot where the working end is securing the knot and keeping it from slipping out. So we're going to take our tail and hold it in our hand, wrap our yarn to create an X and 2 lines on the front, go under and then over, pull through. And now you can test this knot here to see if you've got it right, and you can pull it up, and if your working end closes the tail, then that is what you want. If your tail closes it, then that's what you want for your chain 2 method. So now we're going to join our yarn onto our piece, and we can see right here, this is the slip knot that we made, or not the slip knot, the slip stitch. I always get those confused. This is the slip stitch we made. We're going to be working into that stitch. we're going to insert our hook into the back loop of that stitch. You see there's the V, work into the back loop of that slip stitch, and we're going to single crochet. So by joining our work, we're just yarning over and completing a single crochet, just like that. And when you're working in the next stitch, make sure the blue tail, or whatever tail you're working with, is tucked behind and into the piece. Now this is the single crochet we slip stitched in, so we'll be skipping that stitch and working right into the next one. And the same thing, we're going to do back loop only and single crochet. Now we're going to decrease, and I showed you in episode 1 the 2 different decreases you can use. I prefer the invisible decrease because it closes the holes a bit nicer, makes everything look a little bit more cinched. But then you can also use the regular decrease as well. So we'll use the regular decrease for this round just because of the back loops, and it can make it a little bit harder. The way the decrease works is by inserting your hook into the next back loop, yarn over, pull through. Don't complete the single crochet, instead insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, and pull through. Now you have 3 loops, and you're just going to pull through all 3 of them to make our decrease stitch. Now in the next 2 stitches we will single crochet, and now you have arrived at your fin. Now when you're single crocheting here, you want to make sure you are working into the single crochet stitches that are part of the body and not any part of the fin. So the best way to do this is by looking at the side rather than from above. You can see the V here is the stitch we want to work into. Now we're just going to jump right over the fin, and we're going to begin our next decrease. So insert your hook into that back loop, yarn over, pull through, and do the same in the next stitch, yarn over and pull through, and then complete your decrease like so. Now we're going to single crochet in the next 2 stitches, and we're going to repeat that, decrease, single crochet 2 until we hit our next fin. And then I'll show you how to work around it again. When you're single crocheting your back loops, you want to make sure you get the whole piece of yarn. Sometimes it can be hard and you can just get like half of the yarn you need and leave some little pieces behind. So keep that in mind as you're working. It's always okay to tear out a stitch or 2 if it doesn't look right or if you mess up somehow. I do it all the time, so it's not a big deal. It's something normal. Now, when you come back around, you should be on our decrease stitch. We just finished 2 single crochets. Same thing that we did with the last fin, just go completely around and make sure you're working in the single crochet stitch and create your decrease. Single crochet 2, and then in our final 2 stitches, we will be decreasing. Just like so. And I'm going to pull up a loop just to show you what it's supposed to look like. You don't need to pull up a loop at all. Now this would be the point where you would add safety eyes if you want to. I have some safety eyes here, so I'll just quickly show you where they would go if I were to put them in. So we're going to see our single crochet round here. We're going to put our eye between those 2 rounds. Almost dropped it. I mean, I did drop it. Almost fell on the floor. And it will be like a little bit catty corner with the fin towards the front of the piece, and you would do the same thing on this side as well. There, you can see how cute it is. But I will be showing you how to stitch the eyes on, so I'll take these out and show you how to stitch the eyes on at the end. Now we're going to continue and do our next round. Now the next round we will be single crocheting and then decreasing, single crochet, decrease all the way around. So first insert your hook around the slip knot and everything and single crochet, and then decrease and repeat that all the way around. Now what I like to do is take these 2 tails, the white and the blue, and tie them together. Now these tails, whether you tie them or not, they won't come out. The slip knot portion of the piece might just stick out. That's why I like to tie them. Just a couple of knots is fine. And that will keep anything from popping out over time. It wouldn't like come all the way out, it would just pop out a little bit. And I like to prevent that with a couple knots. Now what we're gonna do is continue single crocheting and then decreasing all the way around. And if you need to put your stitch marker on, definitely do that before continuing. You can also just count the stitches when you're done and make sure you have 12 total stitches at the end. If you don't, then you probably need to keep crocheting a little bit more. Alrighty, so now we're going to stuff the piece. Now, if you have a hard time stuffing now, you can always stuff before we continue on with the next round. I just like to stuff when the hole's a little bit smaller. That way the stuffing doesn't get caught up in the yarn as much when you do our final round. So just take some stuffing and you're going to stuff it into your piece. I like to stuff from one side and then work my way to the other side. And kind of cup your hands while you do this to kind of keep the wale as round as you can. Just adjust it as much as you need as well. So here's the wale stuffed. I think that is plenty of stuffing. I might add a little bit more when we finish the final round, but that's where I will leave it for now. Now, we're going to do our final round, which is just decrease in each stitch around. So 6 decreases is all you need, and then you are finished with the wale's body. If you added the safety eyes on, then that means you are almost done. If you don't have eyes yet, then we are a little bit less than almost done. But we are definitely getting there. And again, if you are here now, you guys are amazing. I know that crocheting can be pretty frustrating in the beginning. It requires a lot of patience until you get the hang of it. So if you're here now, that is amazing and you deserve a round of applause. Definitely. Almost went on ahead. I went on ahead without you. But don't worry, I pulled it back. Once you finish your 6 decreases, we're going to slip stitch in the next stitch, chain 1, and fasten off. And you just want a good length, good several inches for sewing the bottom closed. Now's the point you can add more stuffing if you want. Use a pencil or anything to stuff it in there. I think this one is pretty good. And here's where we're at. We just have 2 more things to do, and then we're done. 2 more things. So we're gonna first close the bottom hole. We're gonna do this by threading our needle, and we're gonna grab the front loops of all of our single crochet stitches. And this is so we can close our piece. I always like to try and get as many loops as I can, kind of like a little game. And once you come all the way around, you can pull your tail and close up that hole. And now we're going to secure this tail to make sure it doesn't come undone by creating a loop and then pulling our tail under it like so. Pull that tight, and now we're going to tuck in this tail. And I like to weave it in a few times to make sure it is very secure. And you can adjust the yarn as needed as well. And then I'm going to weave this through the body back and forth just a couple of times to make sure it's very secure. When you're done, trim your tail. And there we have our wale. If you've added safety eyes, that means you're finished, which is awesome. I have not added safety eyes yet, so we're not quite finished. All we have to do is stitch our eyes on. So you can do this with your secondary color if you'd like. Otherwise, I'm going to get a bit of black yarn, which I forgot to grab before starting, so I will be right back. Okay, I found some very, very dark blue yarn, which will be perfect for this wale. What you're gonna do is thread your needle and then we will stitch the eyes on. And I like to start from the top since the belly is so white. You want to keep the darker thread on the top of the piece. You're going to insert your hook between the two stitches, the bottom and the top round, and just pull up a good amount of yarn. And right above it, we're going to stitch our eyes. And you can do this once, twice, 3 times, or make the eyes as big as you'd like. I'm going to do it 4 times and then move on to the other side. Just like so. And repeat it on the other side, not the same side. That would be a little strange. Both eyes are pretty much the same size without the need for a 4th loop, so just keep that in mind when you're stitching. It might not be necessary to add the same amount on both sides. Just like so. There we have our 2 eyes. What we're gonna do is cut these tails about the same length. If you have a whole lot, then you can trim it a bit shorter. Now we're going to tie these 2 tails together, just a simple knot, once and then twice. And when you tie these 2 tails together, don't pull too tightly because you don't want to sink the eyes in or anything. You want to keep them the way you sewed them on. Now we're going to weave these tails in. This is just to secure the ends and keep everything secure. There we go, and you can cut these 2 tails. I like to use the end of my scissors to tuck the yarn in. And there we are, we have our finished whale. If you've made it this far and you've finished your whale, you are absolutely amazing, and you deserve a round of applause. Great job, honestly. Doesn't matter what it looks like, it's the fact that you made it and the fact that you tried, and the more you make these, the better you'll get at them. I want to take a second to thank you for joining me on episode 2, whether you were just watching because you needed a slower tutorial or you were watching because you want to learn to crochet, and this is your second project in the series. There will be more in the future. Probably gonna do my axolotl pattern next, but we shall see. If that is a little bit too complicated, we might start with something a little bit different first, but we will eventually get to it. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you're enjoying this series. I know that a lot of people ask me to slow down, so that's why I've been working on these videos, and I really hope that this was what you guys wanted from me. And I'm going to attempt to do this with almost all my patterns on my YouTube, if not all of them, just to fill in any space I have. If I don't have any video ideas, these tutorials will definitely be coming out. I'm gonna try and get on a schedule and get them out a little bit faster, but I'm going as fast as I can for now. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give a thumbs up, please. It really helps support me and I really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed already, I would appreciate it if you do that as well. But you don't have to, it's not a big deal. I will hopefully see you in my next video, whether it will be another episode in this series or something else. I hope to see you then. Bye!